So welcome to this Public Accountability Board on the 10th of March. That doesn't sound quite right. Anyway, whatever the true date is, welcome. And we'll make a start. We've had some apologies. The Chief Constable sends his apologies. June, are there any other apologies, or is it Sally?
It is Sally. There isn't any others, Commissioner.
And it is the 10th, Alan.
It is the 10th. Okay, thank you. That's Gary, who's one of the Police and Crime panel. Thank you for your intervention. So we welcome Police and Crime panel members. That was Gary Weatherall, but also we have Abdul Qayyum, I think, Jim Steinke, and there may be others too that I don't know of. And chairs of the independent panels, I see Anne McCaskill and Steve Rager here. And from the media, I believe we have someone from the Star, Lucy Ashton, possibly. Anyway, whoever you all are, you're very welcome. I need to remind you that we are being recorded, video recorded, so if you don't want to be heard or seen, then you need to leave the room quickly. And if that's okay, then that will be uploaded onto the website. So I'm looking down the agenda then, and I've come to item 3 on the agenda with announcements. I think we have a very significant announcement to make. I'm sure you all know about this now, but if not, then we have to announce that our Deputy Chief Constable, Mark Roberts, is, I can say sadly for us, not for him, is leaving us to go to Cheshire. He's the preferred candidate now for the job of Chief Constable of Cheshire. So I want to congratulate Mark for this very considerable achievement in professional terms to become a Chief Constable. Not many of them in the country, so to get to the top of your profession like that is really quite something. And also to thank Mark for the contribution that he's made while he's been with us in South Yorkshire. I know he's not going quite yet, but this is an opportunity to place that on record and to say thank you for all that you've done for us. A deputy's job is always a critical role, but I think it was particularly so in South Yorkshire, and the contribution you've made, Mark, since you've been here, because as we all know that South Yorkshire Police were not in a good place a few years ago, and you've been part of this really successful team in bringing the force to a really good place now, rated good by HMI, and your contribution has been really significant in that, and we thank you for it. And we're grateful for it as well, for what you've done and the commitment you've shown to us here. You've set a very high bar now for whoever comes in your place, and again, that's no bad thing for us. It puts us all on our toes and on our mettle. So I know you're not going immediately, but can I thank you for what you've done? As I say, we'll minute this. We're delighted for you. We're less happy for ourselves at the moment. No doubt we'll get over that, but we really do wish you well, Mark.
Thanks, Alan. I appreciate that. I've got to say, you have career highlights and you look back at elements of your career, and I think what the officers, staff, and broader team here have achieved is one of those highlights, and one of the things that really will look back on pride as to where the force is now. The force will be absolutely fine. It is stacked full of very talented, committed people who absolutely want the best for South Yorkshire, but really proud to have been a member of the force and still a member of the force. And there's a lot will be taken from here to Cheshire. So, well, thanks for that. I do appreciate your kind words.
Not at all, and we look for great things now over the other side of the Pennines, Mark. So, excellent.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. We have one other announcement as well, and that is, some of you may remember we had in our comms team until relatively recently Lindsay Dudley. Well, she went on maternity leave. She's given birth to a little girl who's called Dahlia Lay, and she weighed in at 7 pounds and 11 ounces. The significance of that totally escapes me, but I'm sure it means something to somebody. That was all the announcements. Public questions. I don't think we've got any, have we, Sally?
No, we haven't, Commissioner.
And no urgent items. And no items to be considered in the absence of the public and press. So we're down to item 7, which is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? If not, shall we move then to the minutes, which is item 8. We've got 2 sets of minutes. First of all, the minutes of the meeting of the PAB held on the 9th of February. Are they a true record of what took place? Anybody want to comment on them? If not, we'll accept those minutes. And then we've got PAB minutes for the 24th of February. I think there is an error there. Lauren, I think we thought you were sending apologies, but you were actually there.
Yeah, I had sent apologies originally, but I did manage to attend on the day. So the apologies just need to be changed to me being attended.
Okay, thank you very much. We missed your ghostly presence, obviously, so thank you. Any other corrections, amendments or comments on the minutes? Okay. If not, shall we move them to item 10, matters arising and actions from the minutes. Michelle is going to be a little late, I think, to this meeting, and Erica, I think you're probably dealing with this, if I understand it right. So if we look at the actions arising, first of all, 396, the issue of the public space protection order. I think we're having a meeting next week not in the town hall, with the town hall and Councillor Paul Wood on Monday. Tim, I think you're going to be at that.
Yes, I'm Commissioner. I've also had the benefit of a discussion with Kate Joltis this week, which I'll brief you about separately. But yeah, we've got that meeting with Councillor Wood and hopefully can progress things.
Great, lovely, thank you. Item 401, Sharon would look into telephone devices, and she's done that, so that's discharged. 402, Mel Palin would establish whether the downward trend in commercial burglary was taking place nationally. She's responded to that, so that can be discharged. 403, David Hartley would establish if the online portal was available in other languages. And there's a comment there. I don't know whether David's on the...
Yeah, I am, Commissioner. Very quickly, the update is not at this time. It doesn't offer languages. It's part of our ongoing development, but early days for the portal, so not at this time. The second one then, Commissioner, if I may, that was similar in terms of does the new digital desk and online portal offer referral to victim support? And it does by means of what flows from that, not by default. But an online report would be assessed. If that developed an attended response, then that would be the route to victim support. And for our ever improving and ever used web chat facility now, again, digital desk staff are trained in terms of identifying vulnerability and would make a victim support referral from that web chat if deemed necessary.
Great, thank you. Just on the first one, other languages, do you have any time scale there, David?
No, the next iteration, we're really looking at, now we've got this firmly in place and embedded, and there's been no issues at all with the portal, that really within the next quarter we'll be laying out what we see for the next 12-month development, and I certainly see it within that time frame because that is key for us to offer.
Okay, thank you very much. Was someone trying to come in, or...?
Alan, it was just to pick that point up, is Erica, about trying to pitch a point in time in the future when we might get an update from the force regarding that. So Dave's answered that for us, thank you.
Okay, thanks. On to 404 then. David, again, this is yourself, I think. Where are we?
Yeah, Dave's just dealt with this one, Alan, as well. He dealt with both 403 and
okay.
404. Thank
405. Dan Thorpe was established how Yorkshire suicide rates. He did come back to me, but of course there's nothing here for the committee as such. So I think we need to find a way, Erica, of getting something in writing that we can flag up.
Yeah, may I suggest, Alan, that we leave this on the action schedule and then we provide to the next meeting of the Public Accountability Board a summary to show the activity that was requested last time.
Great, thank you very much. 406, an update on stalking protection. We can discharge that. 407, Tim, these local authority community justice panels. There's an answer there. Do you want to add anything to?
Well, I think if I recall back to the context that this came up, because you were asking about the number of volunteers and whether you could assist in advertising this as something the public could help with at the various community meetings. And I think probably if you read through the answer, the conclusion to that is resoundingly yes. And I do think there's probably a bit more for us to do collectively in terms of strengthening the role of community justice panels. So it's perhaps something we can pick up outside of the meeting, but the answer answers the question that was posed at PAB last time.
Sure, thank you very much. I think that's everything then under item 10. Erica, is there anything else? Or?
No, nothing else, thank you, Commissioner.
Right, shall we move then to force performance and to item 11 on the agenda, which is the Rotherham district force performance. Members will know that we move around the districts by rote, by turn, and it's the Rotherham report that we're looking at today. This is agenda item 11. And do we have Steve Chapman with us, Chief Superintendent, Rotherham?
Yeah, good afternoon, Commissioner. You do have Steve Chapman. You also have Superintendent Lynn Knox with me as well.
Okay, thank you. Good to see you both. Well, we'll do what we did before, Steve. You'll know the routine. I don't necessarily ask you to go through the whole of the report, but I'll just draw attention to one or two things that strike me and see what your response is to that. And then at the end, if there's stuff that you want to say that hasn't been touched, we can do that. So we're looking at the Rotherham District Performance Report. And if I could take you first of all to page 29 and to the heading 3.2, problem solving. And I just wondered if you could say a little word around problem solving and what you're doing there and how that can be measured, how you propose to measure the success, what is achieved.
Well, first of all, I think there's two key measurements. One is around victim satisfaction. Well, there's three actually: victim satisfaction, public confidence, and reduced demand. So they'd be the three key measures. And I think probably where I would start off from that is problem solving starts with good neighbourhood policing teams, good partnership working. So in the locality, in the district, the three localities have co-located teams, and the partnership's very strong both from a strategic level to an operational level. And what that distills down into, I would suggest, is if you were to look at Clifton Park, for example, at the beginning of this year it was highlighted that it was the end of last year, it was highlighted that there was a number of burglaries that were happening in the Clifton area. What we found is that some of it was insecure premises. There was people who were just going in to find a place to stay for the night, or ultimately were looking to steal property from those areas, in particular at the dwellings, the houses. The local neighbourhood team did some analysis, did a problem-orientated policing plan, looked at the number of offences when they were occurring, looked to bring in Rotherham Borough Council around it. They improved signage in the area. They implemented Operation Shield. So, for example, there was 1,500 leaflets given out around the Clifton Partnership area. From that, there was 200 people who took up smart water opportunities. And what we did was we looked at the lighting, we looked at the target hardening. We then focused on putting the smart water in the right properties. The partners, RMBC, helped with the leaflet drops. And what we've seen is a real focus then on the perpetrators. So we've had three significant perpetrators that were locked up arrested by the neighbourhood teams. And demand's reduced in that area as a result of it. Now, as much as we've seen a reduction in burglaries, part of it, I have no doubt, is to do with COVID, amongst other things, but certainly that partnership approach, that OSARA model, that bringing in the perpetrators when we see them is making a big difference.
Thank you. Can I take you to, this is top of page 30, the second para down, and you speak there about a shift in focus towards proactive prevention as opposed to reactive measures. and you talk about the CID working with response and neighbourhood teams. I just wonder how that's going and whether that's sustainable, pulling these people in that particular direction.
Yeah, well, first of all, I would say it is sustainable, but it's important. So what we don't want is our teams working in isolation. So whether that's the response teams, going out to the incidents and then not talking to the investigation teams, our CID teams about what they're finding, or indeed our PVP teams about any vulnerabilities that they're going to in that respect. And then finally, the neighbourhood teams need to be involved in all of this because they keep our demand reduction and ultimately our problem solving. So if you use that burglary as an example and the problem solving that was happening there, that will have started off with response officers responding to incidents. We would have had some of our CID colleagues dealing with some of the perpetrators, and we'd have had the neighbourhood teams doing the problem solving, the engagement and visibility. So it's so important that we make sure that our teams continue to talk and that we look towards prevention in order to reduce that demand.
And when you say at the end of the next paragraph, which is about organised crime groups, 3.3, and towards the end there, we recognise that unemployment will allow criminals to exploit those who may be financially vulnerable. And there's a recognition there that there will be a growth in unemployment as we come out of the coronavirus crisis. And all of that is your response to that, is it? How are you going to cope? What do you see as happening when we come out of the coronavirus crisis? What's the response?
Well, I think first and foremost we'll see a shift in demand. So as we're coming out of Corona, more people will be going to work. We'll have the nighttime economy, which will grow as a result of COVID, as we see the premises open. What we see as a response already from a policing perspective, in line with other districts, we've changed our resource profile to bring it back to making sure that we can cover that nighttime economy as and when it starts to grow. And we also make sure that our neighbourhoods are fit for purpose for the engagement, the education, and let's not forget, we've still got the enforcement element, because as much as the rules and regulations of, shall we say, are starting to reduce, they're still there.
If I could just come in, Commissioner, to add a couple of comments to that. We're also trying to be predictive in terms of what is coming, and in relation to the fake goods and contraband, etc., as well as the money lending, really that is now part of our agenda in terms of tackling organised crime gangs. So we're just not waiting on it to happen. We're actually making inquiries as it stands in terms of if these things are actually happening, and we're trying to gather intelligence around those areas so that we can be prepared for what we expect may happen.
Yes.
So on our agenda.
Tim, I think you want to say something.
Yeah, I think the other point I'd make about coming out of lockdown, Commissioner, is we are acutely aware of the potential hidden harm from lockdown. So if you take, for example, rape and serious sexual offending, we've seen a drop-off over the last 3 months. Now, some of that will be due to no nighttime economy, but some of that will be hidden harm. So we are acutely aware of that and looking out for it and making sure that we've got the resources available to deal with it.
Thank you very much. Take you to page 31, and this is the third para down from the top. And as a result, the Rotherham Violence Reduction Unit Partnership Manager has coordinated a pilot 5-week Operation Keep Safe 2 model, professionals working as part of a detached team from Rotherham, Early Help, etc. I just wonder if you could say something around that. And it says it's a pilot scheme. Does that mean it could go on? And if it could go on, should it go on?
Well, Keep Safe has been utilised across the district for a regular basis for a number of years there now. It may well be a pilot in the north area at this moment in time, but it is something that's regularly used as a partnership approach to engaging with our young people, and also giving them real opportunities to take them away from the risk of committing crime and antisocial behaviour.
Okay, so it's just that was just applying to one part of the borough then, the pilot.
Absolutely.
Okay. On to page 32, if I can. Domestic abuse. And again, I wonder if you could say something about that. You've got a chart at the top of page 32, a diagram, and that shows the domestic abuse recorded incidents, crimes falling away. Now, I know some of that is the records are incomplete because it's a partial take on February, but there's clearly a downward trend. And I just wonder whether you saw that as whether you saw that as a good thing or a bad thing. Does it mean that less is happening or less is being reported, or just what is the table telling me, I suppose?
I think this touches on Mr. Forbes' earlier point in part, which is there will be some hidden demand as a result of COVID and the restrictions and the people being at home. So what we are making sure is that our resources, whether that's in response, whether that's in our domestic abuse teams or our PVP teams, are ready for what might be an increase as we come out of lockdown. So we might see incidents being reported more readily, but equally we might see more historic incidents being reported, ones which otherwise haven't been brought to our attention or the partner's attention. So I think those figures are ones that we need to watch going forward. And in the interim, we just need to make sure that we've got every opportunity to protect our victims of domestic abuse. So whilst we might not have seen them physically, we've got apps that we use on mobile phones in order for our repeat victims to be able to contact us. We're making sure that we're readily visible as a partnership across social media. And when incidents do come, we make sure that we respond to them quickly and effectively. And that's shown in part by our satisfaction levels of 80%. And of course, our response times around immediates and priorities.
Does it mean though that as we go forward and we start to come out of the lockdown, you expect those lines to go up and not down?
I would suggest so, Commissioner. That would be my view. I do think they will probably go up. And so, in fact, I'm quite confident of it, even if it's just in light of the nighttime economy, when we see more drinking, when we see more pubs opening, when we see people socialising more. So whilst I cannot say for definite, my assumption would be it'll probably increase.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner, it's Mark. I'll just echo what Steve says there. I think nationally the service is anticipating significant increases in demand. I think there's a number of factors. I think as the nighttime economy is released, we're certainly getting ready for that in terms of preparedness for the staff, in terms of our shift patterns, etc. I think it would be helpful if it was lifted in a phased manner, and we'll certainly be engaging with the local authorities to ensure that, we want businesses to get back and start making money. We appreciate the loss, but I think there needs to be done in a structured and sensible way so that we don't have a really negative impact around that. I think domestic violence, when you get an increase in alcohol consumption, tends to be an issue. And nationally, there's a number of other things that come into play, such as European Championships this year. With me national hats on, we certainly see that when there's a major football tournament, we see increases in domestic abuse rates. We see increases in nighttime economy and alcohol-related violence. And I think nationally, as well as lockdown measures are lifted, and it may be something that depends on the weather as well, we may anticipate seeing increased levels of protest over the summer months as people are released out. So I think, without being overly pessimistic, we need to be prepared. I think we shouldn't forget the impact of officers and staff on this, and that they've not been able to take leave. And just as lockdown measures are being released, we're going to be placing more burdens on them in terms of managing that increased demand. So as everyone else is celebrating, I think it's very likely that our people are going to have an exceptional busy time as lockdown measures are released.
Yes. And what's the date for those big football matches, Mark? When do they kick in, I was going to say?
The kick off in the middle of June through to July. It lasts a month. So they've got group games in Glasgow and London, but then the rest is spread around Europe. But our experience is actually, it's not necessarily issues around stadiums. It's when England in particular play, and we saw this markedly in 2018 with the World Cup in Russia. That's when we see the upsurge in alcohol-related crime and domestic abuse offences.
And is that about people gathering in pubs and watching on big screens, or is it unrelated to that, is it?
Well, it's generally alcohol related. So I think we see instances of disorder where larger groups congregate, but generally, even if it's people consuming alcohol in the house, and again, you can see the scenario where people, having been restricted from having gatherings at the house for a year now, you will get gatherings at houses, and that's when you tend, again, excess consumption of alcohol leads to an increase in incidence of domestic abuse.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm on to page 33. We're still with domestic violence, Steve, and of course we've got the domestic abuse bill going through Parliament at the moment, which is going to make a significant difference. And I've already written commending the bill. I think it's very good. The definition of a victim of domestic abuse now extended to include children and not only the adults. I think that's really good. I think there are some issues around support for the community-based domestic abuse support networks as opposed to those who are in refuges and accommodation. I think that needs something the government's going to have to look at. But on the third paragraph from the top, domestic violence protection orders, we've come across these before in reports from district commanders. I see you say you're making good use of them here, and they're the orders that you have to go to the civil court for, and we have to pay a fee. And the chief and I have written a joint letter now to the ministry saying, look, this is really not on. It's a lot of money. It costs South Yorkshire Police, and we hope we get some sort of response from that. You talk about an average of 9 a month, and I wonder whether is that do you think that's about right, or do you look to that going up, or just a word around that?
I think we could possibly do a few more, Commissioner. But I think key is that that's if all else fails. So at the point that a victim of domestic abuse reports something to us, the importance is to get there quickly, to make sure we gather the evidence, and then make sure that we support the victim whilst we conduct a thorough investigation. And hopefully the result is going to be an outcome 1 to 8, ultimately a charge and a conviction. If we get to a point where it's going to be no further action, and there's many reasons why that might happen, then we will look. If violence being involved, if we can show on the balance of probabilities that violence has been involved, then we'll apply for that order. As a district, I would like to see a few more, and we will always push for more, but we'll give them the appropriate scrutiny around the quality of the investigation first and foremost. And our outcome rate around domestic abuse at the moment is at 24%.
Tim, you wanted to say something?
Yeah. You'll be aware, Commissioner, that we're still rolling out a training programme called DA Matters to all our frontline operational staff. And at the heart of that is the premise that separating the victim and the perpetrator and allowing the victim time and space in order to be able to move away from the relationship, break the cycle of abuse, put in perpetrator programmes to address offending behaviour. All that is at the heart of safeguarding domestic abuse. The journey that we've been on as a force in terms of DVPNs and DVPOs has taken us from being, 3.5 years ago, one of the forces that use them the least to one that uses them the most now. We examined every single quarterly performance review with districts. I think in general, one of the things that we have noticed recently is that there's in some ways an increasing desire to get a criminal justice outcome, and we put a lot of files to the CPS in relation to domestic abuse, quite a number of which come back no further action. And I think there's some evidence to suggest that in some cases we might be better making that decision at an earlier stage and going to implement a DVPN and a DVPO to achieve that aim of putting a gap between the victim and the perpetrator. So certainly on the back of the DA Masters training, some of that data that we're analysing now, I think over the next 12 months we'll continue to monitor that. And I do expect an uplift. And as you're aware, that we've now got a dedicated team within our Force Legal Department that actually go and get all the orders for us, which means that it doesn't impinge on the operational teams within our PVP departments.
Yeah. So the fact there's a fee is not a constraining factor. You're not looking at a budget here or a...
We would never put that above the need to safeguard a victim. But it's as simple as that. We've got a budget for it, but the simple fact of the matter is that the more we get, the more it costs, and the more that we spend on court fees and hand it over to the court service, handing that money over to the court service, the less we can spend on other things. And as you know, despite where we are in terms of our financial position at the moment, there are always demands coming through the door. The demands and the costs of coming out of lockdown are to a degree still uncertain. So it's important to keep an eye on it and to continue to challenge where necessary.
Okay. And what happens, Steve, if someone breaches the order?
Well, we proactively look for the breaches, Commissioner. Once the orders are collected, they put on our briefing systems, our neighbourhood teams, because again, investing in increasing the numbers around the neighbourhood teams means that we can, ask them to do more. And it's absolutely right and proper that our neighbourhood teams know where the repeat victims are, the repeat perpetrators, and it's their role to actually police these orders, to seek out the breaches. And once the breaches occur, then we look to arrest the offender as quickly as possible and put them back in front of the courts.
Okay, thank you. And keeping with the sort of domestic abuse, but on to children, this is on page 35, 4.4. I mentioned the domestic abuse bill and the definition of victim being extended to include children. I wondered whether, is it possible for children, or do children report in to say there is abuse in our family? How does that work?
We do have a scheme, and the name, sorry, somebody will jump in a second, but ultimately, when children attend the schools and if there's any domestic abuse that's reported, that feeds into our...
Encompass, Steve.
Sorry?
Encompass.
That's what I was looking for, boss, thank you. We utilise Encompass, and where that works is children at school can report to teachers, and that can be fed back into our LRUs. And likewise, the local referral units, which is where all our aspects of vulnerability come, equally refer back out into the schools where we know there's been a known domestic abuse incident at that particular address, and we know the child goes to that school. It's about making sure the appropriate wrap-downs in place.
Thank you. Can we go to page 36? And there's a paragraph there. It's below the bullet points. 1, 2, it's about the third one down. And then there's a link to some stuff on the internet. I just wonder if you could say something around this. The work of the team, this is the child exploitation team, the evolved team, now calling itself child exploitation team. And you've referenced there in that para, the work of the team was showcased during the recent safeguarding week when the district commander, then DS Laura Batterman, and the social care manager Alexia Barber launched a video to increase awareness of exploitation and offered practical advice on the subject. I just wondered whether that video could be made available in some way to parents, because it seems to me that parents need to understand these things better.
Well, first and foremost, absolutely it can be, Commissioner. So starting, just giving you the background, our Evolve team deals with child sexual exploitation. It's a partnership team involving police, social care, Barnardos and health. Predominantly that's the team that deals with all our CSE cases that come through on a weekly basis. Now, we had our Safeguarding Awareness Week, which was a few months ago, and one of the priorities for the Safer Rotherham Partnership is protecting children. And within that, what we wanted to focus on as a partnership was increasing the number of referrals that were coming through, both from intelligence and agency referrals linked to CSE and wider exploitation. So at the Safeguarding Awareness Week, there was a professional video done by an external company which highlighted and reminded people about what exploitation looked like, what were the signs and symbols, what would be the signs and symbols for our children who might be subject to exploitation, whether that's gifts, whether that's going missing, whether that's coming in late, whether it's a change in behaviour. And then it also reminded our hoteliers was a key point around if you've got people coming to your hotel or your bed and breakfast or whatever it might be, and it doesn't look age appropriate. If you have concerns, this is what you need to do, this is what you should be doing. And then it moved on to how referrals can and should be made. Now the video has been done in such a way that it's in bite-sized chunks. So we've delivered it already to the hotels that's in the area, and more laterally it's going to be moving out to our services, our partners, in order to give them an update and a refresh on certain areas of the video. And then I am quite confident, thinking back to the content, that there is no problem about it going to parents, and may well be part of that plan. But it is a public forward-facing video.
Okay. It just seems to me that that's one of the groups of people that is really quite key and critical. And if we could find some way of involving them, I think that would be quite something. But we'll leave that with you to mull over. Thank you very much. Can we go to page, where am I off to now? Page 40. It's the heading Working in Partnership, and it's the last paragraph of 7.1. And simply I didn't understand what was going on there. It talks about working with pharmacists to deliver advice on frauds and scams. What exactly are they doing? What is this?
Well, this is much the work that Lynn's been leading on, so I'm going to defer to Lynn Knox, if that's all right, Commissioner.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, Commissioner, basically we are looking to engage with vulnerable people obviously during COVID, and one of the issues, or one of the areas that maybe we haven't addressed at this stage, was around fraud. So because of COVID, because of perhaps more vulnerable groups who maybe can't get out to chemists, pharmacies or so on, we decided, well, how are we going to actually maybe engage with them, but equally give them some advice around fraud, or, you know, cold callers at the door, etc. So it's actually in front of the Public Health Board today on the agenda, where our suggestion, our proposal is that we put in a leaflet, what we'll use fraud as one example, and that actually gets delivered with prescriptions. So initially it would probably be to older people as a starting point, depending on the costings. We have also linked in with the local council to scope what the possibility is getting some funding for that. So it's a really simple initiative, but it gives us an opportunity to get some crime prevention advice out there, but also to engage with some people who perhaps are not able to leave the house and are getting prescriptions delivered to them by their local pharmacies. And it's as simple as that, Commissioner.
Yeah, no, I simply I didn't understand what was meant, but now I totally understand it. And it's this huge, I'm not sure what the word is, huge audience that you engage with, isn't it, as a result of that? Yes. Because I had to go to my local chemist during this lockdown period, and of course there's a queue now, and it goes, twice around the block, and you suddenly realise how many people do engage with a local pharmacy on a normal day-to-day, week-to-week basis. Thank you very much. Thank you. On page 42, Steve, we've talked in these occasions before about in the involvement of police officers with schools, and I know we've in the past we've had dedicated officers in schools, PCSOs and PCs from time to time, and that all fell away, and we're now starting to put that back. And you talk there in 8.2, it's under the heading of drugs, but it's the paragraph in italics. You talk about youth engagement officers. Just want to get some feel for this. Does this mean that every school will now have someone called a youth engagement officer who is dedicated to that school, not necessarily a single person for every school, but is that what it's getting at? That's the aim and the objective, is it?
Pretty much it's to ensure that all the schools across all 3 localities in Rotherham, and I'm sure it's the same for the rest of the force, have a person or persons they can go to. So, for example, in the north of the county, we have one officer who actually covers 4 or 5 schools, but nonetheless does a very good job around it.
Yeah. So even though they may have more than one school, there will be a named person who schools can get to know.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. And finally for me on page 43, well, it's 43.0 to 44 residential burglary. And you talk there, you touched on it already, but the number of offences fell, of course, dramatically during the period of the lockdown and the virus. And we've said a little bit about what you think might happen now as we come out of that. But I just wonder if you could expand on that just a little more about, because people talk to me all the time about what's going to happen with residential burglaries. And if I can take you to 45, you've got motor car thefts as well. Whether there's something happening here. Are people shifting from burgling houses to pinching cars? Because there seems to be an increase in car thefts. I mean, burglaries may have gone down, but car thefts seem to have gone up. And you reference there in 9.4 a particular interest that the people seem to have in taking transit vans in Boston Castle Ward, thefts of transit vans. Could you just say something around that? Is that a growth area of vehicle thefts?
Well, it was for us, Commissioner. I'm hoping it's not now. We've arrested 3 people, one of which was definitely committing them and is now serving quite a sentence, I would suggest. But to answer the question more in full, yes, I think we have seen a change in trend around crime as a result of COVID. So as people's been in the house, as shops have been shut, people have had to look at other ways in order to improve their income if you were a criminal. And one of those ways has been by entering insecure vehicles and often stealing vehicles. And on this occasion, from the work that was done, again, it was our neighbourhood team. They did the analysis, did the work, identified the times between, and was successful in arresting the right people, I would suggest. Time will tell, but we have seen our theft from motor vehicles reduce. And clearly, under that OSAR model, we'll keep looking at that just to make sure that continues.
But there is some shift going on, is there? There is more interest in vehicles and vehicle theft.
We've had, as you can see here, we've had some increases, most certainly. But they've certainly plateaued. We now need to see if they're reducing. Okay.
And, Tim, you wanted to say something?
Well, just really to confirm what you say, you're absolutely right, Commissioner. We have seen a general increase in vehicle crime offences across the board. And I think without a doubt, it'd be driven by that serious acquisitive crime. You know, much of that offending is driven by addiction. So we've definitely seen a shift. Also, there's we've seen other trends as well, like dog theft. We've seen increase significantly. I mean, it's still a relatively small number of offences, but these are commodities which have, that they are a commodity and they've significantly grown in value over lockdown. It's something that's been seen across the country.
And dog theft, across the county, it's the same audit, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, not just a Rotherham thing.
No. I forget the numbers off the top of my head, but I suppose what I'm getting at is that it's a shift in commodities. Ultimately, much of your acquisitive crime is fueled by addiction. People are after commodities that they can sell. It's been very difficult to break into houses because most people are working from home. So we have seen an increase in vehicle theft. Interestingly, just as a commodity, you talk about vans being stolen. The actual price of second-hand vans has risen over lockdown, believe it or not, just because of some of the demand for them from delivery companies and things like that. So it doesn't surprise me that we're seeing this increase in theft.
And they can get the van. Talking about the vans now, they can get them away and sell them on, can they?
It depends. Get them away. They can be brought up for spares. All of these things have value.
Okay.
Commissioner, if I could come back to one of Mr. Folger's points as well, if that's okay.
Of course.
Yeah, so the one in respect of dog thefts, it has been an emotive subject in Rotherham. I'm sure it's been the same across the force. I've had a number of people ask me about it. From July of last year, we had 63 offences recorded across the force to the present date. 10 of those have been in Rotherham. I think the key message that we've been putting out is, look, there is a lot more that we're hearing and seeing on Facebook around suspicious activity, people being approached. Please understand that this is what you need to report to South Yorkshire Police, that we want to hear about it. We want to build up a picture. If there is offenders out there that we're not yet identifying, then we'll do so. any reports will be taken seriously. It's an emotive crime after all. And when they are reported, they're taken with every seriousness. There was a recent one in Sheffield. We had detectives working on it, and that's the seriousness for which the force in the district take these type of offences.
Okay, thank you very much. And there are all sorts of dogs, are they? They're not just little dogs easily picked up and whipped away. They're all sorts, are they?
Yes, is the short answer.
Okay.
Not necessarily thoroughbreds. Crossbreeds are worth equally as much nowadays.
Thank you very much. I think that's everything that I wanted to ask you, Steve, about that report. And I wonder if there's anything at all that you wanted to draw attention to. You don't have to, but a chance if you did.
Thanks for the offer, sir. We pretty much covered anything I wanted to cover. I don't know if Lynn wants to say anything before we close off.
No, Commissioner, I have nothing to add. Thank you.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much indeed. It was, and thank you for producing a report addressing those issues that are of particular concern to me at the moment. So I do appreciate that. Thank you very much. Okay, everybody, shall we then move in under the heading of forced performance from item 11 to item 12, which is forced performance against the police and crime plan. As you know, we look at each of the priorities in the police and crime plan in turn. That's protecting vulnerable people, tackling crime and antisocial behaviour, treating people fairly, and today we're going to have a look at treating people fairly. And I think what I'll do, Tim, is this going to be yourself or?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so if you'd like to introduce it, just give us a couple of headlines.
Okay. To start off, just perhaps reference the fact that you mentioned about the HMIC ratings for force being good across the board. It's also important to note that the force got its first outstanding grading from HMIC in relation to lawful and ethical behaviour, something that we're rightly proud of. So the report talks to a number of headings. The first one is about the efforts that we're going to increase the numbers of officers and staff in the force. The first couple of pages talk about the challenges that we've had in terms of recruiting throughout the COVID period. It's a challenge that so many people in the force have risen to. There's an awful lot of effort gone in, both from our people and development department through to officers, senior officers giving up their time to interview new recruits. And you'll see from the first page that we're absolutely on track in terms of our recruitment plan. And indeed, over the rest of 2021, we've currently got 700 applicants currently awaiting assessments, 135 awaiting interviews. So we've got a very good pipeline of people wanting to join us. And certainly from my own perspective, I always try to do at least one day per campaign interviewing recruits. And we're really, really pleased with the quality of recruit that we're getting. Certainly the new recruitment programme now that it talks about in the police education qualifications framework, you can either join as a high-level apprentice or join as a graduate entry. We're getting a very, very high standard of applicants, and it's really pleasing for the future. The challenge with all of this is that when you're recruiting 700, an uplift of 700, and recruiting for natural wastage, you're recruiting way over 1,000 police officers over 3 years. That means we're going to be left with a very, very young workforce. So it's really important that we get the training right. And policing very much is there's only so much you can teach in a classroom. So we have a course that new recruits go through that involves Sheffield Hallam University and being taught at our training centre. But the real learning comes when they experience policing for the first time and they're actually deployed on the streets. And the new training programme now differs from the old. The old training programme, effectively, you went out and were tutored in the response function. And once you'd completed 2 years service and you were signed off as no longer a probationary constable, you'd then have the opportunity to specialise into neighbourhoods or investigation. Well, the new programme now means that you effectively get a rotation throughout a 3-year period if you're an apprentice, a 2-year period if you're a graduate, and you undertake a posting in response, a posting in neighbourhoods, and a posting in an investigative capacity. And we believe, and certainly the national programme is focused on producing a more experienced, more well-rounded constable at the end of that programme. But it's been really important that we have enough tutors to do that. So right back from, I'm sure it extends beyond my time in the police, but when I joined the police, I had a tutor constable, we all did, someone who takes you out, shows you the ropes, teaches you the right way to do things. And it's really important that we've got the right people to do that. And because we've got lots of new recruits, we need lots of tutors. So on the second page of the report, it talks a little bit towards the Tutor Academy programme that we've launched to ensure that we've got lots and lots of officers who are fully equipped in terms of coaching, mentoring, the professional skills to be able to take new recruits and make sure that they get the skills and the experience that they need to qualify as an independent patrol officer. And that point in the training when they gain independent patrol status is really, really important. So that's been a huge amount of effort for us going over the last few months. But I'm pleased to say that that's going very, very well. We've got lots of new tutors. We're up to date with our recruitment plan and really pleased with the position that we're at the moment.
Can I just pause you on that one then and say on your second page, that's page 48, 3.5, I think it is, yes, you reference Detective Now and Police Now schemes. Could you say a word about that? And what I'm interested in as well is, do you make a bid for Police Now and Detective Now people, or how does that work?
Well, it's obviously Police Now, Detective Now is run by a private not-for-profit company that train police officers and put them through a fast-track programme. And effectively, we buy a number of police. So we will buy, I think, off the top of my head, I think it's 48 uniform officers, 22 detectives that we've taken. We run that alongside our own recruitment programmes because it gives us diversity of candidate. And certainly what we have found is that through the Police Now, Detective Now schemes, they've certainly had more success on a national basis in recruiting a more diverse workforce. And that's obviously something that's about brand, because Police Now certainly cornered the market. They do a lot of work with universities and are competing against the likes of PwC, KPMG in terms of offering a graduate career. And certainly they've had more success than any police force in the country in terms of, perhaps with the exception of the Mets, in terms of getting a more diverse range of candidates. But what it also does is allows us to recruit directly into specialisms. You know, we've made a commitment of 316 neighbourhood policing posts, including the inspectors and the sergeants. That's really important to us. So to fill those, you know, but some of the police now officers will go straight into neighbourhoods because part of the specialist training they have is around problem solving. So we post them straight into neighbourhoods. And likewise, much of the acute stress in the force at the moment, the capacity gaps lie around public protection where we need trained detectives. So by engaging in the Detective Now programme, that's allowed us to get in people who have the capability and training to be able to operate as trainee detectives from day one. So it's about approaching our recruitment challenge and our capacity challenge in different ways, and that's why we've got a combination of the higher level apprentice programme, our own graduate entry programme, Police Now and Detective Now. And as I say, it's going very well, very well. We're really pleased with the position that we're at the moment, and we'll continue to monitor it and build it into our plans over the next year or two.
Thanks.
So moving on, if I can take you to paragraph 3.118 and the section that runs after that talks a little bit to treating minority communities and people who minority communities differently in the criminal justice system and making sure that hate crimes properly recorded and investigated. So one of the issues that's been raised recently is about juveniles through the custody system and how do we manage juveniles through the custody system. Well, I suppose what I'd say from the outset is clearly, where possible, we like to avoid bringing young people into the custody system. Custody is not the best environment for a young person. It can be quite traumatic, and unless it's properly managed, it can actually have a negative effect on that young person's future behaviour. But obviously, it is necessary on occasions where we've got to do that. So paragraph 3.19 just talks to some of the special measures that we put in place around managing young people through the custody system, which is really important. We've restarted an audit on that, and we're actually giving that a little bit more close scrutiny over the coming months to make sure that what we want to happen is actually happening on the ground. But it's really, really important that when we have young people coming through custody, that we recognise that their experience of custody is very different than an adult offender. If I then move on a little bit, just talk to paragraph 3.21 about hate crime and how we manage hate crime. It's really, really important that when someone's the victim of a hate crime, that we recognise that this is a different experience. If someone experiences a crime, however minor that may be on the scale of offending, if it's motivated or aggravated by hate, the experience of that victim is particularly acute, and it's really important that we recognise that. And you can see in the graph at the top of page, unfortunately the page numbers haven't printed on my hard copy. It's just above paragraph 3.26. You can see the trend of hate crime that we've had over the course of the last 12 months. You see that big spike over the summer, without a doubt, with some of the protest activity that we saw last summer. We saw a spike in hate crime. Some of it was related to EU exit as well. But we monitor really, whenever someone's a victim of a hate crime, the investigations get particular scrutiny by our local command teams. We monitor the effectiveness of hate crime investigations through our quarterly performance review process. And in particular, we look at hate crime satisfaction. It's really important to us as a command team that when someone's a victim of a crime in this way, we may not always be able to solve it. Often these are crimes that happen, particularly if it's about verbal abuse. They're crimes that happen in a passing instance, so it's often not possible to actually solve it. We do solve some of them, but it's really important that the service we provide in terms of the initial contact and the treatment that we give them, that's seen positively. And you can see there out of paragraph 3.28, out of the 212 victims of hate crime that were surveyed, 92% satisfied with the contacts that they had, 89% satisfied with the treatment that we're given. Obviously, follow-up is always an issue around satisfaction, but generally our hate crime satisfaction tracks our overall satisfaction, so it's really important to us that we closely monitor that.
Would it be true to say, I'm looking at the graph and what's written in para 3.26, for instance, that acknowledging that it's an underreported crime nationally, but the crime survey for England and Wales, which is, as it says here, widely considered a more reliable indicator, reports a reduction in hate crime incidents experienced by adults within recent years. Now, many people would find that surprising. I know many of the ethnic minority groups that I talk to would simply challenge that and say, just not true. It may be underreported, but it's not true that it's going down. What do you make of that?
I find that a really surprising statistic. My take on it is it's still underreported. And whenever I speak to to members of diverse communities, I get exactly the same message, that they don't see any reduction of this. And I still think there's, I openly acknowledge that there's an issue of confidence to come forward. But I think if you look at our trend, our recorded trend in recent years, we've seen an increasing willingness to report. Sarah Pillman has led on hate crime for a number of years, has put an awful lot of effort into our systems and processes, third-party reporting, external scrutiny, to make sure that we give a good service around this. And we do an awful lot in terms of publicising our approach to hate crime to encourage people to come forward. So I'm loath to turn around and say that the crime survey for England and Wales is wrong, because it is the benchmark of crime, people's experience of crime in the UK. But certainly in relation to hate crime, my view is it's still an underreported crime. So whether it's going up or down is probably for others to judge. What I do want to see is an increase in people's willingness to come forward and speak to us about hate crime. It's vital that we know about it. If we don't know about it, It's very difficult for us to target our neighbourhood teams to proactively disrupt it if we're getting spikes of it in areas. So we must hear about it. And what I can assure any victim of hate crime is that we take it deadly seriously, even if the context of the offence, in a scale of offending, is actually relatively low level. We recognise absolutely that the impact of this on victims is different, and we absolutely strive to give the very best service possible. And I can assure any member of the public, if they're a victim of hate crime, to report it to us, and we will do our very, very best to provide a proper response.
And often perceptions are as important to people as realities. If they perceive that hate crime is increasing, then that's a reality that we have to take account of, whatever the recording of that crime situation is.
But this again, though, is important about this reinforces the importance of the investment in neighbourhood policing. Because if we've got neighbourhood teams that are properly engaging with all sections of the community, and we're picking that up, and we're picking up isolated instances and hotspots of hate crime, we can and will proactively do something about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I take you on, Tim, to page 54? And that's the very difficult and thorny issue of diversity within the force, mainly the ethnic makeup of the force, though not entirely so. I mean, the force is obviously, as I understand it from the latest recruitment figures, doing very well in terms of male-female. The third female representation of the force is up over 40%, I think, now with the new recruits. But we seem to be struggling with ethnic diversity and representation there. And I wondered whether there's anything more you can say around that. And in particular, I think I'm interested in why there are some forces that seem to have done better than South Yorkshire. Not sure where Cheshire is in all this, but some.
Well, I think the issue is we've done. If you look at our overall visible minority ethnic workforce makeup, it doesn't. The simple fact of the matter is it doesn't represent the population in South Yorkshire. It's roughly about a third. And having just filled out my 2021 census only at the weekend, I'm sure plenty of people in Sheffield and South Yorkshire are doing the same. And I think we all anticipate that figure of 9-point-something% will be considerably higher in 18 months' time when the results of the census are published. We have seen a positive move. If you look at our current recruitment campaigns, we are seeing a slow increase in the number of visible minority ethnic colleagues joining us, but it's not enough. It isn't enough. Personally, I think that perhaps other forces do make more use of the neighbourhood teams, or may have made more use of their neighbourhood teams in terms of community outreach, and certainly in terms of the neighbourhoods board, which I chair. We've now put recruitment on as a standing item on the monthly neighbourhoods board, and there's an expectation. Our next recruitment campaign, I know it says May in the paper, I think it's more likely to be July and August, our next recruitment campaign. We're putting together an explicit requirement for all our neighbourhood teams to work with people in development, to work with our equality hub, to look at a series of events, outreach events in different communities, to see what we can do in the next campaign to try and up that number of people joining us. Certainly, as I say, police now and the investment that we've made in both police and detective now has seen some better results. But I think it's going to continue to take some time. It's obviously a really challenging area for us. If we had an easy solution to this, as I say, we'd have done it years ago. All forces struggle with it to a greater or lesser degree. What I can do is assure you that we're absolutely committed to it. Certainly, in the next round of campaigns and beyond, you're going to see far more of a role for our neighbourhood teams in terms of running those outreach events, explaining what it's like to be a police officer, explaining the journey of South Yorkshire Police and what we're trying to achieve, and trying to identify people who would make excellent police officers who broadly represent the communities of South Yorkshire.
Yeah.
Just to, Commissioner, if you can just, I mean, I'd echo what Tim says, and we're not in any way complacent. We have a real focus on this, so we always recognise there's more we can do. I think there is some danger in comparisons between forces, because you need to look at the resident and diversity nature of those particular areas. So the Met, for example, and West Midlands tend to have a higher proportion of BAME officers and BAME officers, for example, but their resident populations are significantly higher. And I think, as Tim says, it'll be interesting when the census comes out, because we know the population of Sheffield is very different, particularly in younger age groups. Cheshire, by the way, is slightly above their locality, but it's a smaller workforce and there's a very small degree of diversity in some aspects of the community there. So it's not a like for like. In terms of the effort, we have considered our advertising campaigns. As Tim says, the detective now has been really successful for us. So on that initial intake, I think it was around about 34-35% of candidates, successful candidates with BAME. I think females was 75%. So there is something about understanding the offer of that, how that's perceived by different sections of the community as a more attractive proposition. And I think what Tim's saying there about direct recruitment, it's perhaps seen as more of a professional vocation for some people, and that's more attractive. But we do online mentoring. We use our people from the Equality Hub to make sure that we can give support to people. We are absolutely forensic in looking at every stage of the recruitment process to identify, is there a disproportionate level of attrition for different stages? And then we will seek to try and put mitigation measures in to try and make sure it's as fair and accessible to everyone possibly can. So it's not for want of effort. We recognise we need to keep pushing on that and building it up. The detective now thing is a really interesting piece that we need to fully explore, but we do recognise it's an area that requires continued focus.
Thank you. I don't know whether Anne McCaskill, the chair of the Independent Ethics Panel, wants to say anything about this, because I know this is an area, the whole area of disproportionality and so on, is an area we've asked the IEP to look at. And I'm trying not to see whether you're still here.
Yeah, I'm still here. It is one of the things, we've got new members in the panel, and it is one of the things that we are keen to look at. And on our agenda was to begin to do a kind of independent look at the recruitment process, but going from the initial recruitment into the initial days in the force, to have a kind of, I suppose, an objective view at it. And one of our new members is a very senior HR manager, and he's very keen to do this, and he's worked with very diverse workforces. So I think that will be quite interesting. Yes,
he's an HR director at Liberty Steel, isn't he? So he may have his work cut out at the moment, but yeah, we look forward to hearing from the panel. Thank you. Tim, I don't think there's anything else I wanted to pick up from the report, but was there anything else you wanted to reference? Or are you happy with that?
I think I'm happy with that, Alan. It runs through everything that you'd expect, so no, I'm happy with that.
Lovely. Thank you very much, and thank you for the report, which as usual is very full and lots of detail in it. Thanks very much. Thanks. That was item 12, pages 47 to 62. So we're now looking at Chief Executive reporting, and first of all, item 13, a report from the Violence Reduction Unit. And just before I bring in Rachel and then Graham, I really need to say a word about both of them, because this will be the final time that Rachel is able to come to the PAB, because she's moving on. She's leaving us, unfortunately, as head of the VRU. She's returning to public health, which is where she was seconded from. Goes on March 23rd, so her end is in sight. I just wanted to say, Rachel, that we want to thank you for what you've done for us, because you very much established the VRU in the first place, along with Superintendent Lee Berry, who's also now left South Yorkshire. And it's really been a lot of hard work, real hard slog during this period to get the VRU up and running. With all the uncertainties hanging over it as to whether funding was going to continue, having to turn things around very quickly in extremely short timescales, and make all those links with partners across South Yorkshire, partners from a whole diverse range of organisations. And you've done all that, and you've achieved all that, and you've done it very well in a very short period of time, very intense and concentrated period of time. So we wanted to thank you for that, Rachel. We hope we haven't killed you in the process of doing all this. But just to say and to put on record that we thank you for the vision that you brought with you about the public health approach, which I think is now well embedded in South Yorkshire Police and lots of other organisations in South Yorkshire as a result of your work and your effort. Thank you for the energy that you've put into this, the commitment you've given to it. And also thank you for just being a very nice person as well, which isn't always what we experience with people who are under pressure and having to do things quickly. But I think you've given us really strong foundations, and the VRU is in a very strong place now, both locally here in South Yorkshire, but also nationally. I think our VRU is very well thought of by people nationally, including the Home Office, and that's really important that we have those links and we are thought of in that way. So thank you for what you've done, and sorry you're leaving us, very sorry, but we really do wish you well in your new, whatever the future holds for you. So that's Rachel. Now Rachel will introduce the report, but I also need to say a word about Graham Jones, who's going to be the new head of the VRU. Welcome, Graham, to PAB. We'll see more of you in the future. Graham, as we know, comes from the National Probation Service, so that's his background. And we look forward to you, Graham, now taking the VRU forward in whatever the next phase is. I think you've got those strong foundations that Rachel and her colleagues have put in place for us, but I'm quite sure that your particular expertise lies in that area of building on the partnerships that we've already got there and developing them, because that's how the VRU will prosper going forward. So a warm welcome to you as you join the VRU as the new leader. So Rachel, if you want to take us through your report, which is pages 63 to 68. Rachel.
I will. Thank you very much, Commissioner, as well. And I want to say it's been a pleasure working with everybody, and I've really enjoyed my time with South Yorkshire Police and the OPCC and working with all the partners. So I will miss you all. And today I have picked out 3 key elements from the report that I just want to talk about. So if we go to page 65 first, I want to pick up trauma-informed South Yorkshire, because I think this has been a real win for the whole of the county. Actually, we've been working with Sheffield City Council on a training package which was written by them. And we've supported in development of that and with trainer time to roll out the training across South Yorkshire. And we've currently got 25 sessions that are being delivered throughout Q4, and we'll have around 800 people being trained from South Yorkshire, which is fantastic in such a short space of time. We've had some initial evaluations back which have been excellent, and anecdotally to me people have reported how good the training's been. Which is really good, and that will continue into next year as well. We also have developed trauma-informed practice within South Yorkshire Police. So we've got some trauma awareness training on the degree course. The uniformed officers are receiving awareness sessions as part of CPD. And there are plans in place, working in partnership with various different leads from South Yorkshire Police to progress bespoke training for call handlers and officers involved in missing persons, as well as custody staff. Are there any questions on trauma-informed training before I move on? Okay.
Tell us what it is.
Oh, okay, yeah, that would help. So being trauma informed is really important in order to ensure that we're treating everybody fairly and equitably. And it's about recognising that most people will have experienced some form of trauma in their lives and moving away from what's wrong with you and more towards what happened to you and how can we support you. So it's the training's a basic couple of hours around that knowledge, and we plan in future to build on that as well, so that practitioners who need more in-depth training will receive it.
Keep going then, Rachel.
Okay. So Shed Load of Cakes, which is next, at 5.4, also on page 65, I want to draw your attention to. I think this has been a real success for the Sheffield Partnership Manager who's been leading on this. It's now called a shed load of, and you can replace cake with pies or whatever you choose. She's been working with the Department for Work and Pensions to secure additional funding. Now, a shed load of is a bespoke project to support people who have been in touch with the criminal justice system back into employment, giving them skills and training and support back into the world of work. So there's a few community kitchens now identified with salary costs being funded by DWP in each area of South Yorkshire, which is really great news. The third thing that I want to draw your attention to is the emergency support for young people that's on page 67. So in January, we were awarded an additional sum of money to support local charities and social enterprises to help young people who are at risk of violence or involvement in violence. The funding was really welcomed and needed, and we had a lot of bids with over 50 local groups applying. We were able to secure a bit more money from our budget than what we were allocated, so we were allocated 94,000, and we ended up awarding 106,000 to a total of 17 projects, which has really been welcomed at a difficult time for community organisations.
Thanks very much, Rachel. And I think that the whole of this period, this last 12 months, it was always going to be difficult, meeting the challenges of short deadlines and having to bring in so many partners into the conversation was always going to be difficult. But having had the lockdowns and the restrictions has made it 10 times worse. And many of the projects that we had or originally had, of course, assumed that people would be able to gather together and that you'd be able to have eyeball-to-eyeball contact. None of that's been possible. So it is extraordinarily fleet-footed on your part and your team that you've been able to do something with the money and with the projects, despite all those travails that have been visited upon us. So we just hope that things get better from here. Thank you. Does anybody want to comment at all? Is there a police comment at all on any of what Rachel's been saying?
From me, Commissioner, it's not so much a comment on what Rachel has been saying, but just a note of thanks, really, on behalf of the force for the work that Rachel's done. During her role as head of the VIU, I think it's fair to say that she's infused everybody with her commitment and her passion, energy and innovation, really, and she's been an absolute pleasure to work with. And I'd also like to say thank you on behalf of the Women's Network for the work that you did with them. It was much appreciated, and it certainly helped give it a new direction after a period of consistency, and that's invigorated the Women's Network, so thank you for that as well. You have said that you will miss us, and I think it's fair to say that we will miss you too. But good luck in your new ventures, and do stay in touch with us.
I will, thank you.
Thanks, Rachel.
A lot of nice things being said, Rachel. And normally we have to wait for our obituary before we learn things. So that's really good. Savour the moment. There aren't many of them in life, so savour the moment. Thanks very much. Graham, did you want to say anything? Graham Jones.
Yes, just briefly. Yes, I'm incoming head of the South Yorkshire Violence Reduction Unit and been very fortunate to have what will be about a 3-week handover with Rachel, which you don't often get in this life. So I'm very grateful for that. My background is, as the Commissioner said, is probation. Worked in South Yorkshire, was Deputy Chief Exec of the Trust when we were a trust, worked across the northeast of England, and also done some work with the MOJ on some fairly large scale projects. So I think I bring a good local knowledge, some good connections and some good experience to this project. All of that said, I am on a very, very steep learning curve in these short time that Rachel is still with us. And it's exciting to be able to build on the foundations that are there. I mean, it is. I'm still learning what is there because there are so many facets of it. So what comes next, in a sense, we kind of the timing wise, I arrive at the time where the bid for funding for 21-22 is about to go live. We've had some advance information and are looking at it, and the VIU has a suggested figure of 1.6 million. The details of that aren't yet established, and the actual bidding process hasn't been formally published, but we are preparing based on the intelligence that we've got about how we will bid for that. Alongside that, we'll be working with Colin McFarlane around the surge funding, which has also sort of been publicised, but the process for that's not yet formally started. But there's one of the key themes is that there needs to be a clear link between the work of the VIU and the product from surge funding, and we're looking at ways of doing that. So that's what's immediately happening, and it is plenty enough to keep us busy. But I look forward to working with you and the other partners in South Yorkshire to move this excellent project on. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Graham. And surge funding is $1 million, isn't it? I think
that's the figure I've heard. So yeah,
the value of surge. So there's quite a lot of money here we're talking about when we add surge to VIU. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Everybody happy? Okay, thank you very much. That was item 13 on our agenda. So we come to item 14, which is PCC decisions. Erica, pages 69 to 72.
Commissioner, I'm happy to take this one. It's Michelle Buttery, your Chief Exec. Sorry, I wasn't here for the beginning of the meeting. I'm now here for the decisions. There's been 4 decisions since the last meeting. They're all set out there, Commissioner. Off-road bikes, Inspire to change the perpetrator programme for domestic abuse, the emergency funding to support young people that's been offered with the Home Office Winter Contingency Fund that's been bid for, and finally, and topical given the presentation you've just received, laptops for children and young people to divert them in relation to risk of serious involvement in serious violence. That's laptops and dongles that have been provided to those children that are more susceptible. So unless there's any questions, Commissioner, all the details are set out in that report.
Anybody got any questions or comments at all? The only thing I would say is that we've seen over the past year, and we partly understand the reason for that with the coronavirus extraordinary thing and totally coming out of the blue and so on and so forth. But we've seen now a whole series of little pots of money, or potentially fairly sizable pots of money thrown at us continuously throughout this period of time. We had to deal with those today at the meeting, and I just hope that this doesn't become a kind of habit of government, that it proceeds in this way, because a lot of the schemes that we support, we're glad to support them, and they're good schemes, but so often you feel that if only we could have better notice of these things and a substantial pot of money guaranteed over a longer period of time, it gives us a chance to come up with more sustainable and more sensible proposals. So I hope that it's not a habit of government now to proceed in this way. But that's not to say we're not grateful for the money that we have received. We are, and that sets out what some of it is. Thank you very much. That was item 14. So On then to item 15, Michelle, this is you again, pages 73 and 74.
Yes, Commissioner, we usually provide the onward work programme so people can see what's on the agenda for next time. We only go as far as the PCC elections, which are due to be held on Thursday, the 6th of May. So we've only got April's there instead of the next 3 meetings ahead. And just to say, the value for money strategy that's reported there as coming for both the OPCC and SYP's involvement in that. We're going to defer that to a later date because Sophie, our Chief Finance Officer, is working with Debbie as the Forces Section 151 officer on that. So that will be deferred to a later date. That's all there is to say on that one then, Commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions again on that, or everybody happy? Thank you. That was item 15 then. 16 is any other business, and you're supposed to have notified me at the beginning of the meeting. Nobody did, so there can't be any. And the date and the time of the next meeting is the 9th of April at 1 p.m. Thanks very much, everybody. Thank you for your attendance and for your forbearance and patience in these very difficult times, but good to see you all, even though remotely. Thanks very much.